Hello and welcome to my video lecture on how dynamic web pages are processed with PHP. So up until now we've talked about static web pages. Now static web pages are the kinds of pages that you set up when you were in IT 30. Now during IT 31, the focus of this course is how dynamic web pages are processed, primarily with PHP. There are other languages, of course, that you could use, and we'll talk about those later. But for instance, we've got our web browser. In this case, again, I'm going to be using Google Chrome most of the time. And we're going to make an HTTP request. We're going to type in a URL. That's going to be processed by our web server. In that request, we're going to have code that's going to either more than likely, we're going to need an interaction with the database server, which for this course we'll be using MySQL. So we send our HTTP request. That's going to get handled by the web server. PHP script is going to run on the web server. That might include interaction with our database server, which would be MySQL. And then the HTTP response would be a formatted web page that would be displayed in our browser. So up to this point, we now know what HTML is. We are going to be using HTML5, the fifth version of hypertext markup language for this course, at the time of the making of this video anyway. We know what a static web page is. A static web page is just HTML tags that will sit and not change until a web developer physically changes them. We know what an HTTP request is. Simply typing a URL in sends a command back to a web server. That can include PHP and other languages. And then the HTTP response is the file or the code that gets sent back from the web server to our browser. Now that web server could be doing stuff in the background, but the request and the response doesn't include that. We can have a dynamic web page, which can use PHP. So we have our PHP interpreter that's going to read that code and process it. We have our database server. Again, for this course, it's going to be MySQL. The round trip, so an HTTP page gets rendered by our browser. That's the term used for taking that HTML tagged code and converting it using the web browser to make it visual, to make it appear visually appealing. So the round trip is exactly that. The round trip is the HTTP request and the HTTP response. So one side of the trip is the request, the other side of the trip is the response. And that concludes my video tutorial on dynamic web pages and how they're processed.